So, 2018 is over, and normally I'd be doing my top 5s now. Unfortunately, we ran into some problems. I'll talk more about why I'm not doing best and worst animated TV shows in my next video, but right now I want to talk about the animated movies, because I didn't really do a lot of animated movie reviews last year. I know I did The Incredibles 2, and that Netflix movie Next Gen, and of course the animated DC movies. And yes, I know a couple of other animated DC things came out and I missed out on them. It's unfortunate. I'm afraid I'm going to have to let those pass, which is a shame because one of them was the Constantine miniseries, and I really wanted to see that. But as far as the theatrically released movies, I unfortunately let a lot of them pass me by, and mostly for financial reasons. In fact, I didn't go out to the theater as much as I had wanted to last year. I didn't even do a whole lot of regular movie vlogs for the few of you who watch those. So I did miss out on quite a few things. So I checked out 6 animated movies from last year that I missed out on and decided that I'm going to do sort of a rapid-fire review type of thing for this video. I won't go as in-depth as I usually do because, well, I have 6 films to look at, so it's going to be pretty quick, but I will give my general opinion on them. Also, keep in mind that there might have been some other ones that I missed out on. I know I didn't see Smallfoot, nor do I really care to be honest. So I got 6 movies that I got to talk about, so let's get started. First up, Early Man, the movie that came out the same weekend as Black Panther. That is unfortunate. On a side note, I really hate when that happens, like when a movie comes out the same weekend as another, big movie that's coming out. I think the same thing happened with, I think it was Captain Underpants came out the same weekend as Wonder Woman, so I don't think a lot of people got to see that. I know it has gained some popularity since then, but it's really unfortunate that when, especially when it's an animated movie, and it comes out during, with Black Panther or some other movie, it's kind of a shame because, it deserves a chance. Even if it's a movie not many people are really looking forward to, it still deserves a fair chance. Anyway, Early Man is brought to us by Aardman, who brought us Wallace and Gromit, and it's about a bunch of cavemen who have to save their land by playing soccer. Or football. It has a very good sense of humor, it's got some really good visual gags, and that's kind of to be expected from Aardman. That's usually their sense of humor, and just in general, the movie looks really good. The problem with this movie is, well, it's basically every sports movie ever made. You know the kind I'm talking about, where it's like the underdog team who's not really good at playing the game, but then they have to have a big match against these superstar, all-star players, and there's usually something at stake, and it gets kind of heated, but then the underdogs win in the end, and the day is saved, etc. You've seen this movie before. It was a dime a dozen in the 90s. But still, it was alright. I think people who really like Aardman will really get into this, especially if you like their brand of humor, so it was okay. Oh, and to any aspiring filmmakers out there that are looking to release a film this year, piece of advice: don't compete with Marvel. You won't win. Next up is Isle of Dogs, that movie everyone was talking about, brought to us by Wes Anderson. As expected of a Wes Anderson movie, it was very well shot, it had some great dialogue, and the stop motion was really great too. Wes Anderson, of course, also did Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is a fine film, and, well, I was going to say that it's very on par with that, but then again, basically all of his movies, isn't it? The one thing about this movie is that the storyline is pretty absurd, and, well, it's kind of messed up, too. Like, there's a lot of animal abuse in this movie, and especially as someone who's a dog owner, it was not cool. It was just not cool. But there was a lot to like about it. It was very funny. It had a lot of humorous moments that kind of juxtaposed to a lot of the messed up stuff. So I suppose this counts as maybe a dark comedy? There's a lot of non sequiturs in this too. Like there's a scene where one of the dogs was giving some kind of really intense speech, and then suddenly he says, "You have a tick," and then he bites a tick off of another dog's nose and then spits it into this like golf hole that just happened to be there, and I was It's like, there are moments like that that really, really got a laugh out of me, but at the same time, there's just so many awful things happening in this movie. I also found it kind of funny that it seemed like they didn't really explain if the dogs and humans can understand each other. There seemed to be like a little bit of a vagueness to that, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And as absurd as the story was, I did find it interesting and engaging. It had a lot of fun characters, as, again, expected of Wes Anderson. The voice acting was really good, and yeah, I'd say it did deserve a lot of the praise it got. Next up is Mirai, a movie that I think slipped under a lot of people's radars. It's, of course, an animated movie from Japan, and they do bring those over to the US every now and then, but unfortunately, they usually get a very limited theatrical release, which is very unfortunate because a lot of them are really good. However, I did manage to catch a showing of it, so I'll talk about it. From what I know about this movie, it's the same guy that made Wolf Children, which is another movie that I really like. So it has a lot of the same themes about, you know, parenting and growing up and just generally dealing with life, with a few fantastical elements added to it, although in Mirai, the fantastical elements may or may not be actually happening. Though it seems the main theme of this movie is something that I've seen in other anime movies and even in other anime, and it's that your grandparents and great-grandparents went through hell just so you can be here. So stop complaining about every little thing. Which I think is a very good message to have. I really do like the portrayal of the great-grandparents in this movie because great-grandpa was a badass. But it was a very good film, and again, it's a shame it got a very limited release, as do a lot of anime movies when they come to the US. Still pissed I missed out on the My Hero Academia movie. Heard it was good. Next up is Ralph Breaks the Internet, aka WreckIt Ralph 2, a movie that most people don't seem to think is necessarily bad, but it seems to be very polarizing. This movie was really, really funny though, and I love Ralph and Vanellope together. They are a great comedy duo, and they have great chemistry together. I loved all the new characters as well, and I gotta say, good job making a character who's supposed to represent internet spam into kind of a likable, nice guy. Well done. I was actually surprised that there was no real villain in this movie. A lot of the new characters seemed like they would have filled that role, but they didn't. Instead, the second half of the movie is mostly about internal conflict, and without giving away too much, I can best describe the second half of this movie using a quote from the Black Dynamite animated series. Damn, self-awareness is a cold mother. I think the disappointing parts about it was they abandoned the video game aspect almost entirely. And yes, they did start out in the arcade, and there were some video game stuff as they went through the internet. But I think that's what a lot of people really like WreckIt Ralph for, because of all the, the video game characters that they interact with. By the way, they finally acknowledged Tron in this movie. Thanks, Disney. That is your property. Should have had that in the first movie. The overall story of this movie, though, it feels like, those, like, Toy Story specials they do every now and then? They had a bunch of shorts, and they had, like, TV specials with all the Toy Story characters. It felt on par with those. Or it might be more appropriate to compare this to Finding Dory, the sequel to Finding Nemo. It's not necessarily bad. In fact, it was very good. It's just wasn't really necessary, to be honest. We didn't really need to see this extra stuff. But again, it was good. It's worth a watch, especially if you love WreckIt Ralph. It's very funny. It has good characters, again. And there were some after-credit scenes that I need to bring up. There's two, actually. One is toward the beginning, and without spoiling anything, let's just say there was a scene in the trailer that they left out of the movie, and that made me sad. And the other one is all the way at the end of the credits, so be sure to stay after the credits when you're watching this movie. I won't say anything again, I won't spoil anything, but they say that there's going to be a Frozen 2 sneak preview after the credits. They say that actually right after the credits, so be sure to stay and watch that. I know a lot of people who are watching this right now probably already know about it, so no spoilers please, but feel free to reinforce that in the comments below so that people who haven't stayed after the credits will stay after the credits. Next up is The Grinch, the second remake of The Grinch. Well, at least this time they animated it. And I gotta say, for all the things about this movie, at least it's way more aesthetically pleasing than the live-action one. And this is coming from someone who likes the live-action Grinch. Though there's really not much to say about this one because, well, it's the story of the Grinch. Who doesn't know the Grinch by now? I think everybody knows the Grinch. See, the problem is the Grinch is a very simple story. It's just a guy who hates Christmas but learns to love Christmas. The end. And when you try to stretch that into a theatrical release, well, you're just going to add a whole bunch of unnecessary padding to it. Like, there's, characters that just came out of nowhere that they invented for the movie. There's characters that change just so they can have, like, a story arc so, we can add more time to this. And it's all just really unnecessary. It's just fluff. And, of course, they have to give the Grinch a backstory. And in this movie, it's a little bit more simplistic than it was in the live-action version, but, again, it's not really necessary. We didn't know why the Grinch hated Christmas in the original because it wasn't the point. But it wasn't all bad. The voice acting was really good. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was a really good Grinch, and it had a lot of bright colors, as to be expected with a work of Dr. Seuss. And even though a lot of the jokes were there to be padding, I still got a few laughs out of it. I'd say it's alright. It's harmless. It doesn't go over the top or anything. It serves its purpose, but, at the end of the day, the original is always going to be best. And finally, Into the Spider-Verse. Yes, I actually got to see Into the Spider-Verse. I remember a lot of people being put off by this movie, mostly because of the animation in the trailer, because it's very low frame rate. They almost looked like it was stop motion. But once you see the movie, it really does look great. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is one of the most visually stunning films I've seen in a very long time. We actually almost went to go see it in 3D, and at the last minute we decided not to, and I kind of regret that because it must look amazing in 3D. It wasn't blatantly obvious what the story was going to be either, but I didn't really expect it to go where it was going to go. There were a lot of plot twists, especially early on. And I loved all the characters in this movie. Even though some of them didn't get a lot of screen time, they were all very lovable, likable, and memorable. And I wasn't even really familiar with certain characters. Like, I never knew Spider-Noir, I never knew Penny Parker. I do remember Spider-Ham from back in the day, and I gotta say, they managed to make a lot of them very relatable. Some more relatable than others. And I gotta say, it was really cool seeing an animated movie of a mainstream superhero in theaters. I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often. But since this movie is gaining a lot of popularity and praise, I predict we won't be seeing the last of that. Yeah, I don't really have too many negative things to say about Into the Spider-Verse. It was great. I think a lot of people didn't really care for the Kingpin's design, but he wasn't even really in the movie that much to really dwell on it. But overall, this was great. If I was doing a top 5 best animated movies of 2018 list this year, I think this one would definitely be number 1. There are, however, 2 things left I have to say about it. One is, again, stay after the credits, because with all the Spider-Man characters in this movie, without spoiling anything, of course, they acknowledge another Spider-Man character that, in my opinion, does not get enough love. And the last thing I have to say about this is, well, brace yourself for the Stan Lee cameo. It's gonna hurt. So that concludes my rapid-fire review of a lot of the animated movies that I missed last year. Again, I didn't get to see everything, so if I missed out on something, feel free to let me know in the comments. But until then, my name is Rob, and have a wonderful day.